The story takes place in 1954 Algeria, a land that appears distant and isolated but is deeply entangled in global politics and human suffering. At this time, Algeria is under French control, and the tension between the colonizers and the local population is at its peak. This land is not just a physical space but a symbol of domination, resistance, and identity. France's control over Algeria has lasted for decades, shaping every aspect of daily life, from law and order to education and culture. For the local Algerian people, this control feels like suffocation, a denial of their voice, dignity, and right to self-determination. The desire for freedom simmers beneath the surface, turning the land into a silent battlefield even before violence openly erupts. In this divided world, identity becomes deeply complicated. People are no longer defined only by who they are, but by which side they are assumed to belong to. Trust is rare, and suspicion dominates every interaction. The French see rebellion everywhere, while Algerians see oppression in every uniform. Even those who do not wish to participate in violence are forced into the conflict simply by existing within it. Neutrality becomes a dangerous position because both sides view it as betrayal. This environment creates constant fear, where survival depends not only on strength but on choices that are never morally simple. The land itself reflects this division. The vast deserts, remote villages, and harsh landscapes mirror the emotional emptiness created by years of conflict. Isolation is not only geographical but emotional and social. Communities are poor, resources are scarce, and desperation is widespread. Hunger, poverty, and injustice fuel anger, making violence feel inevitable. The struggle is not just political but deeply personal, affecting families, traditions, and generations. Every act of resistance or enforcement leaves scars that extend far beyond the moment. French control also creates a sense of alienation even among those who are technically on the same side. People like Daru, who is associated with the French but emotionally connected to the land and its people, feel like outsiders everywhere. He belongs fully to neither world, which reflects the broader identity crisis created by colonial rule. This confusion of belonging shows how power structures fracture human identity, forcing individuals into labels that do not reflect their true values or experiences. The divided land becomes a place where morality is constantly tested. Laws imposed by authority clash with local customs and survival instincts. Justice feels distant and impersonal, while revenge and tradition feel immediate and unavoidable. In such a setting, every decision carries weight, and every path leads to loss in some form. The land does not offer clear answers, only difficult choices shaped by fear, loyalty, and survival. Ultimately, Algeria in this story is more than a backdrop. It is a living presence that shapes the characters, lives, decisions, and destinies. It represents the cost of power imposed from the outside and the human toll of prolonged conflict. The land stands as a reminder that when control replaces understanding, and authority replaces compassion, even the most ordinary lives are pulled into extraordinary suffering. Daru stands at the center of the story as a man torn between duty, identity, and conscience. Once a major in the French army, he has deliberately chosen a quieter life as a schoolteacher in a poor Algerian village, teaching geography to children who live with hunger and fear. He tries to bring stability and kindness into a world shaped by violence. His decision to leave the army reflects a deep rejection of bloodshed and authority-driven cruelty. Daru believes that education and compassion are more powerful than weapons, and through his actions, he tries to protect innocence in a land that is rapidly losing it. Despite his past connection to the French military, Daru does not see himself as an agent of power. He treats Algerian children with respect and care, providing food to their families when needed and creating a space where learning feels safe. He does not distinguish between French and Algerian lives in terms of worth. This moral stance isolates him, as both sides of the conflict view him with suspicion. The French authorities believe he is too close to the locals, while the rebels see him as part of the occupying force. Daru's humanity places him in a dangerous position where kindness itself becomes an act of resistance. When Daru is asked to escort the prisoner to the authorities, His internal struggle intensifies. He understands that delivering the man will likely lead to his execution, and he refuses to be responsible for another person's death. His refusal is not rooted in rebellion, but in moral clarity. Daru does not believe that following orders absolves one of responsibility. To him, obeying unjust commands is a form of violence. This belief places him in direct conflict with the system he once served, revealing how deeply his values have evolved. As Daru travels with the prisoner, his actions consistently reflect empathy rather than judgment. He feeds him, cares for him during illness, and protects him from both rebels and French settlers. Daru does not excuse the crime, but he refuses to dehumanize the man. This distinction highlights Daru's belief that justice should not erase compassion. He sees the prisoner not as a symbol of rebellion or guilt, but as a human being trapped by circumstance, poverty, and tradition. Daru's refusal to choose a side is often misunderstood as weakness, but it is rooted in strength. Remaining neutral in a violent world requires immense courage. He is fully aware that his stance may cost him his safety, his career, and even his life. Yet he chooses to act according to his conscience rather than fear. His moral independence challenges the idea that loyalty to a nation or cause should override personal ethics. Through Daru, the story explores the cost of being human in inhuman times. His compassion does not protect him. Instead, it isolates him further. Yet he remains true to himself, even when it leads to exile and loss. Daru's journey reveals that morality in times of conflict is not about choosing the winning side, but about refusing to surrender one's humanity, no matter the consequences. The journey through the desert marks a turning point in the story, where the external conflict of war transforms into an intense internal conflict for both Daru and the prisoner. As they move away from the school and deeper into the harsh Algerian landscape, the desert becomes more than just a physical setting. It reflects the uncertainty, danger, and moral isolation that surrounds them. Every step they take carries the weight of death, betrayal, and choice, making the journey emotionally as well as physically exhausting. Throughout this journey, Daru is forced to confront the reality that neutrality is nearly impossible in a land consumed by violence. Armed rebels, French soldiers, and vengeful civilians all see the world in rigid terms of loyalty and revenge. Daru, however, continues to resist this binary thinking. When they encounter French settlers who want to kill the prisoner out of anger and suspicion, Daru stands firmly between them, weapon in hand, risking his own life to protect a man he barely knows. This moment shows that Daru's morality is not theoretical. It is active and dangerous. He is willing to become a target rather than allow injustice to take place in front of him. The attack by the Algerian rebel further deepens Daru's emotional burden. When Daru is forced to kill in self-defense, the act devastates him. This single moment shatters the fragile peace he has tried to maintain throughout his life as a teacher. He does not celebrate survival, nor does he justify the killing as necessary. Instead, he feels the full weight of guilt and sorrow, proving how deeply he rejects violence even when it is unavoidable. This moment emphasizes that Daru's struggle is not about survival alone, but about preserving his sense of self in a world that constantly pushes him toward brutality. As the journey continues, the relationship between Daru and the prisoner evolves into something deeply human. The prisoner's confession about his crime reveals the complexity behind what first seemed like a simple act of murder. His actions were driven by hunger, family responsibility, and the brutal customs of blood revenge. Daru listens without judgment, and for the first time, the prisoner is seen not as a criminal or a symbol of guilt, but as a man shaped by desperation. This exchange creates a fragile bond built on honesty and shared vulnerability. The desert journey strips away labels and politics, leaving only two men facing death together. They share food, shelter, fear, and silence. In this isolation, Daru begins to understand that true freedom lies not in obeying laws or escaping punishment, but in choosing one's path with dignity. The prisoner's desire to surrender to authorities is not cowardice, but a sacrifice meant to end a cycle of violence. This realization challenges Daru's earlier assumptions and forces him to accept that morality can take different forms depending on circumstance. By the time they reach the crossroads, the journey has transformed them both. Daru is no longer just a teacher avoiding conflict, and the prisoner is no longer just a man awaiting judgment. The desert has tested their beliefs, exposed their fears, and reshaped their understanding of choice, responsibility, and humanity. Violence in the story is not presented as sudden or extraordinary, but as something woven into daily existence, shaping behavior, relationships, and decisions. It exists in the background like an unspoken rule, influencing people even when no weapons are visible. The constant threat of attack, punishment, or revenge creates an atmosphere where fear becomes normal and trust becomes dangerous. In such an environment, violence does not always announce itself loudly. It often appears through silence, suspicion, and the pressure to choose sides. For those living in this land, violence removes the possibility of innocence. Even individuals who wish to live peacefully are forced to adapt to its presence. Daru's life as a schoolteacher seems calm on the surface, but it is surrounded by danger. His isolation in the plateau is not just geographical but emotional, created by the knowledge that any moment can pull him into conflict. The arrival of the prisoner makes this reality unavoidable. Violence enters his home without invitation, proving that no place remains untouched by the war. What makes the violence especially tragic is its lack of clear justice. Acts of killing are not driven by morality but by fear, loyalty, tradition, and survival. The prisoner's crime is rooted in cultural customs of honor and retaliation, where refusing to avenge blood can mean death for one's own family. This system traps individuals in cycles of violence they did not create. Responsibility becomes blurred, and guilt spreads beyond the person who commits the act. Violence becomes inherited, passed down through expectation rather than choice. Daru's forced act of killing during the journey reveals the deepest cruelty of war. He does not kill out of hatred or ambition, but out of necessity. Yet this does not lessen the emotional damage. The moment shows that even justified violence leaves permanent scars. Daru's reaction is not relief but despair, highlighting that survival achieved through killing comes at the cost of inner peace. War demands actions that contradict personal values, turning moral people into unwilling participants. The presence of violence also distorts relationships between communities. French settlers see all Arabs as potential enemies, while Algerians view all Europeans as oppressors. This collective suspicion erases individuality and replaces it with labels. As a result, violence spreads easily because people no longer see one another as human beings. Fear becomes a weapon more powerful than guns, shaping how people think and act. Even when violence does not physically occur, its psychological weight remains heavy. The threat of punishment, execution, or revenge influences every decision. The prisoner's fear of tribal retaliation and Daru's fear of being targeted by both sides demonstrate how violence controls lives without constant bloodshed. It dictates movement, silence, and choices, leaving no true escape. In the end, violence is shown as an inescapable force that reshapes morality itself. It does not simply destroy bodies. It erodes identity, compassion, and freedom. The story makes it clear that in a world governed by violence, even the most humane actions carry danger, and peace becomes not a state of being, but a fragile hope constantly under threat. The final moments of the story bring the theme of freedom and choice into sharp focus, revealing how deeply intertwined they are with responsibility and consequence. After enduring the harsh journey through the desert, Daru arrives at a crossroads with the prisoner, a place that symbolizes the moral and emotional turning point of the narrative. Here, Daru makes a decision that reflects his deepest beliefs. Rather than delivering the prisoner to the authorities, he offers him a choice. One path leads to the town and inevitable punishment, likely death. The other path leads to the nomads, toward a life of escape and uncertainty. By doing this, Daru removes himself from the role of judge and executioner, refusing to let authority dictate the fate of another human being. This act of granting choice represents Daru's understanding of true freedom. He believes that freedom is not merely the absence of chains, but the ability to decide one's destiny with awareness and dignity. However, this freedom is heavy and painful, not liberating in a simple sense. The prisoner understands this burden deeply. His hesitation reflects the fear and responsibility tied to choosing for oneself in a world where every option leads to suffering. Freedom, in this context, is not a reward but a test of character. The prisoner's final decision reveals the complexity of moral choice. Instead of escaping toward safety, he walks toward the town and his likely execution. This choice is not driven by obedience to colonial law, but by loyalty to his cultural values and fear of endless retaliation. By surrendering himself, he hopes to stop the cycle of violence that threatens his family. His action transforms him from a criminal into a tragic figure seeking peace through sacrifice. His freedom lies not in survival, but in taking responsibility for the consequences of his actions. Daru, however, pays a high price for allowing this choice. By refusing to deliver the prisoner and by stepping outside the expectations of both sides, he condemns himself to isolation. When he returns to the schoolhouse and finds the threatening message left behind, he realizes that his moral stand has made him an enemy. His attempt to remain human in an inhuman system has cost him his safety and belonging. Freedom, for Daru, becomes exile. He is free from guilt, but not from consequence. The ending emphasizes that moral courage does not protect those who practice it. Choosing humanity over obedience does not lead to peace or reward. Instead, it often leads to loneliness and loss. Yet the story suggests that this cost is unavoidable if one wishes to live with integrity. Daru's fate shows that freedom and responsibility cannot be separated. Every true choice carries a price, and avoiding that price means surrendering one's conscience. In the final reflection, the story leaves the reader with an unsettling truth. Freedom is not granted by systems or laws, but claimed through difficult choices. These choices define who we are, even when they leave us alone. The story does not offer comfort, only clarity, showing that moral freedom exists, but it demands sacrifice and acceptance of irreversible consequences. This story reminds us that in times of conflict, choosing humanity is often the hardest path. Every decision carries a price, but compassion defines who we truly are. If this story moved you, here's my more videos. Watch them for powerful stories, deep meanings, and unforgettable lessons. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more such content.